Yes, so my name is Dr. Edewede Oriwoh. I would like to thank the British Computer Society Hertfordshire branch for this invitation to give a presentation this evening on a topic in cybersecurity or in digital forensics. I opted for cybersecurity. I will apologize in advance in case you hear any drilling coming from the room next door. Yes, there is some building work and construction going on. But yes, thank you very much once again for this invitation and for this opportunity. I will be talking about a cybersecurity topic, and the main focus this evening will be the members of the public, who we sometimes refer to as end users, if we are not talking in the context of organizations. Members of the public who may not be as well versed in cybersecurity subjects as cybersecurity professionals and experts are. I also want to look at the role of cybersecurity experts when it comes to supporting members of the public who do not know as much as the experts know. As part of this presentation, I will attempt to run 3 different polls. I've sort of spaced them and introduced them at different points during the presentation. Hopefully everything will go according to plan. I have shared the links to the polls with the team at the BCS end of this conversation. So thank you very much. If you can bring them up when the slide for the polls come up, please, that would be very helpful. This is a general overview of what the presentation will cover today. I'll start with a short story, then I will take you through the definition of a Mugu in the context of cyber crimes, cyber criminality, who the targets of cyber crimes are, the role of cybersecurity experts, which is basically the main conversation that we're supposed to have, or we are going to have today. Then we'll look at the results of the polls. It's a really relaxed poll or set of polls, 2 questions in each. I'm not looking for strict responses where I'm going to put out graphs and charts. I just want to have a look at, get a feel of what is going on and see what happens with cybersecurity experts before attacks, during attacks, after cyber attacks. But yes, we'll carry on and then we'll conclude, look at the results of the polls if they've all come in. We'll conclude the conversation and I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have. So I will please ask that you share the link to the first poll with our viewers. And then we'll carry on with the rest of the conversation while they complete the poll. Just 2 very simple questions. So thank you very much once again for this invitation. A short story. About 20 years ago, I was sitting in a living room somewhere back home, and 2 young women were there just chatting, laughing about something that had happened, a number of stories they had heard. And I listened to what they were talking about. Now, this was about 20 years ago. I hadn't done my first degree. I hadn't been involved at all in anything to do with cybersecurity, been aware of cybercrime. Even the expression cybersecurity, cybercrime, those expressions were not part of parlance at the time, at least not part of my vocabulary. But we had started to hear stories about scams, something very popular in my country that we refer to as 419 crimes, advanced fee fraud. These had started to crop up and become more almost part of the mainstream conversations. And that afternoon, these 2 young women were talking, laughing about something they had heard and some stories they had heard. Whatever, news to me, news to all of us. It was all new, and something has stuck with me since, something that they said while they were talking as part of what was happening. And part of the story. They looked at me at a point and one of them said, in the middle of all the laughing and recounting everything, and I will say this in pidgin English, and then I will translate it to English for our audience. Hopefully more people in the audience this evening will understand me if I say it in English. But in pidgin English, they said, the person where they fall for scams, now person where they find something, we're not lost. I'll give you the translation. The person where they find something, we're not lost. The person who falls for these types of scams is somebody who is looking for something that is not missing. And this struck me even as somebody with next to no knowledge about cyber security, cyber criminality, and all the laughing that was going on. I thought, at that time, these ladies are not cyber criminals, by the way, well-to-do, comfortable, don't need anybody's help. But I thought that way of looking at the people who have fallen victims to these crimes looking at them in that way is really interesting. And by the way, at that point, international cybercrime was not the conversation. It was more what was happening to people at home, people that you know. It just struck me and it stayed with me. And I hope that by the end of this presentation, when you walk away today, even if nothing else stays with you, I want you to try to understand the way some cyber criminals see their targets. And these people were not criminals. They're not criminals, in fact, till date. But you have to understand the mindset and the way you are viewed as a person. And if you are an expert in cybersecurity here this evening, you are welcome. Take this away as the way your family members may be viewed, your friends, your colleagues, your grandfather, grandmother, somebody who, maybe a friend of yours who always refers to herself or himself as a Luddite. Oh, I'm not going to check. I don't really know. I don't care. I just want to sign in. I want to find out more about this new social media platform. Think about them in that way, that the way they are viewed by cyber criminals in some cases, and I'm focusing now mainly during my presentation on cyber criminals who go after targets to scam them using certain things, certain approaches. For example, they go through romantic channels, through dating sites, advanced fee fraud, where they say, I have somebody who's got some money stuck or held up in one part of the world, held up by customs. You give me X amount of money, we pay to the customs, they release the bulk of the amount, and I give you your share. So you advance me a fee, you advance me a cost, a price, an amount. It comes in different shades, but just pay attention to the way things are viewed in different parts of the world. Okay? It's not victim blaming. It's more a way of looking at the world. Okay? So who is a Mugu? Who is a Maga? These are well-known terms, depending on which spaces you move in. Okay? A Mugu or a Maga is seen as a potential target. That word is very important. Or a target that is already being exploited as part of one or more ongoing cybercrimes. A potential target. That means you on this call could be a Mugu or a Maga. It is really important that we are not too self-confident or overconfident that we don't realize we could also be targets. We also need to recognize that there is a certain degree of disdain for the targets. I will explain what I mean when I give you the literal or the definition of the word Mugu. Okay, so it's usually used to describe the targets, people who have been captured as part of maybe an online relationship scam. The person is sending them thousands of pounds or thousands of dollars or whatever the currency may be. They have their chats and they say, oh, this person is one of my Mugus or one of my Magas. All right. Potential targets, i.e., whatever you may think of yourself, there is a chance we will get you. There's a chance they will get you. A Mugu is seen as gullible, is seen as foolish, viable target, and a potential victim. Remember what I said about being seen to a certain degree and being looked upon with disdain. So I'll give you the literal translation. A Mugu is a fool. Okay. I have it on good authority because I checked again this evening. I thought, well, I grew up, I guess, in my mid-20s, late 20s, hearing the word Mugu, and even before, but the more popular word is the word Mumu. Sorry, I'm dragging you across the world now using different languages. But a Mugu has been confirmed as meaning exactly the same thing as Mumu. Okay, so I've checked with somebody who speaks the language. A fool, basically, okay? Nothing personal. You're a source of income. And I'm sure if you know anything about cybersecurity, you know, okay, that there are different types of attacks, different types of targets. Sometimes you are not exactly the target of an attack. It just happened that you fell for the attack. You were a low-hanging fruit. But a Mugu is a fool, all right? So we talked earlier, if you look at my topic for today, it's a Mugu and a Maga walk into a chat room. So what? Remember, potential. So the person is a potential target. That person who never reads anything that they see online, they just click next, they click share, they take part in quizzes, they share their photographs, they're effusive online, they give everything there is to give on the internet. You see, I'm sure you've seen this among some people that if you go on social media sites, they fill every form going. They agree to everything. Anything that passes by, they want to take part. A challenge, I'll do it. So what? The internet is there for everybody to use. You should not be so afraid of the internet that you don't make use of it. There are many things we are taught. If you've actually taken a cybersecurity course, there are many things we are taught at the beginning of the courses, right? One of the first things is, here's an agreement, sign it. It's an agreement it's an undertaking that you will not use what you have learned for anything bad, right? So there's a very common one. Just acceptable use policies are very common. There's another one that we are told, one of the many mantras in cybersecurity, Cybersecurity 101. If you want to stay secure, they always ask at the beginning of a course, what is the most secure computer in the world? Well, it's the one that somebody has turned off, locked up in a box, and thrown into the middle of the ocean. It's useless to everybody, but it's secure. That's not the function of the internet. So yes, people will go online. A Mugu, a Maga, somebody looked upon in disdain, but mainly just ordinary everyday people. So what? Well, without adequate training and support, they could become targets of successful cybersecurity attacks. Now, remember I said they could be caught by random non-targeted attacks, okay? Somebody goes into a chat room, sees people talking about how they are lonely, they'd like a relationship, they are getting desperate. Person just sends out messages to 50 or even 500, 1,000 random people and hopes for someone to bite, and maybe 200 bites. And out of 200, 50 stay in touch. And then out of 50, 20 send money. Over time, it doesn't happen by magic, but it's called social engineering. It works. They could be caught by targeted attacks, as we know. Another example of the first type of attack is the more common one known as phishing. Okay, so just a phishing attack, you send out a spread and you hope for people to get hooked. Then you have the targeted attacks, whaling, spear phishing. Those are good examples. And then they can just be collateral. Not good to refer to people as collateral, but this is reality, okay? An attack on a government's website, an attack on the NHS, okay? It's attacking the NHS. Maybe the attacker is thinking, okay, let's take down the NHS, get some money, some ransom, attack a particular government, get them to do something, release some prisoners. Problem is, when you attack these overlying bodies, okay, whatever is going on beneath is affected. So the collateral, the people who are beneath, who are on the hospital gurney, who are in the operating theater, being operated upon, and then you shut down the equipment. You haven't considered how that is going to affect in some cases. Of course, there are others that frankly don't care, but you've not considered how the attack will affect people who are not your direct targets. You're too busy thinking about the hospital management, for example, thinking about the government you want to get your message across to. So it's not always the case that the people friends, family, uncles, aunties, colleagues, are the direct targets of these different types of attacks. Before I continue, if you don't mind, please, can you share the link to the second poll with the people on the call? And then we'll carry on and talk about what these types of attacks, what cyber criminality basically causes, what it leads to. So the losses and the costs for individuals, for governments, and so on and so forth. So let's share this second poll and then we carry on. Give it a few seconds. While you complete that, look at the costs and the losses that people suffer. I've put these into two groups. These lists can go on and on, okay, into eternity. They're too long, okay? There are too many impacts of attacks on individuals and on people and on organizations, I beg your pardon. But let's just look at a few of them. Financial loss, the quick, obvious, clear one. When a person is scammed, all right, even if the person is seen as somebody who is greedy, somebody who is looking for something that is not lost, not missing, they still lose out financially, okay? People can lose their pensions, for example, okay? I don't need to take you through exact, precise stories. There are too many of these stories online of people giving up thousands of pounds, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of pounds. Okay, after they've been scammed online, they've fallen for scams and they've been successfully taken for a ride. All right, bearing in mind that in many cases they are not looked upon as individuals. It's more you fell for the scam, you fell for the scam. I remember giving a lecture a long time ago, talking to students about using people's Wi-Fi and how it's against the law. I'm talking to them about the Telecommunications Law and the Communications Act in Britain. And I remember some students being surprised. Whoa, what? The Wi-Fi is open. Why am I not allowed to use my neighbor's Wi-Fi? It's open. They haven't locked it down. And I always say, not every open door is an invitation to enter. Walking down the street and checking people's car doors to see which one is open. Excuse me, just because somebody left their car door open is not an invitation for you to come in, drive the car away. But yes, some people, I guess, are not aware of some of the laws that apply in this country to some things that they treat as normal, as everyday activity. So financial loss is a major one. People can lose entire life savings to cyber criminals and to scams. Loss of freedom is another one, okay? Now, when you hear about cyber criminals, don't always think that these are lone rangers, free people going around doing whatever they like. In some cases, they are part of syndicates that are being managed by gang bosses, by bosses of different gangs, for example, or organized criminals. So they're not necessarily free people. Many of them have been, in a way, enslaved, entrapped. They cannot escape. Maybe they are doing this to pay back a debt, for example, doing this to keep somebody else safe, to ensure the safety of somebody else. Another way to look at this is if a person is being scammed and money is being stolen from them, that money can then be routed into human trafficking and paying for people to be sold or pushed across a border and then to be sold into servitude and slavery. So the losses for cyber criminality are vast. And it's important for experts not to look away because they think, well, family members, there's really no need. I don't need to give them any advice or tell them anything. Actually, you are helping in more ways than you realize. So being a cybersecurity expert should go beyond your job. You're almost like an evangelist for trying to keep the rest of society safe. It's really important that you do what you can to spread the knowledge that you have, that you've gained over time, the skills that you have to try to help other people stay safe, because by doing that, it has a domino effect elsewhere. People can lose their jobs as well. Don't need to go into details, but a cyber attack that's carried out using somebody's account within an organization to make it look as if the person carried out the attack, for example, using them as a jump-off point, using them as a point to store, for example, indecent images or indecent images of children. If the organizations don't know how to investigate to prove that this person was innocent or wouldn't even put in the time, this can lead to a loss of a job on the part of the individual or individuals. Non-tangible impacts of cyber criminality, loss of trust, automatically, okay, and these cannot be measured. Again, the example I was giving about job loss, it could be because of a loss of trust. We can't trust you to handle our affairs. I mean, you are using our machines, our devices as servers to host these kinds of images. We can't have you around our organization any longer. The mental stress and strain for people who suffer these types of attacks. You just need to go and watch some of the documentaries, the outputs from the investigations of what happens to some of these people, the victims, okay? Imagine an elderly person who has completely lost everything just because they thought they were helping somebody in some part of the world that needed support, and they ended up giving away their entire pension. Then consider the situation where the elderly person is probably not exactly someone who is in a state of mind or a frame of mind or in a place in life where they can help themselves or they can comprehend what is going on. They're much easier to scam, so some of them are not even aware that they've given away all of their money. So the mental stress and strain for them, their family as well, can lead to family and relationship breakdowns as well. Identity theft can lead to a loss of identity, even if the person's identity is recovered, so to speak. They get their job back, they get their credit cards back, everything is restored. The mental stress on that person cannot be measured and can be lingering and even linger for years and years down the line. Reputational damage as well is a major one. reputational damage for countries. I have been on too many online courses and on too many online seminars, and I mean too many, where certain countries are the go-to countries as the butt of the joke when it comes to cyber criminality. I watched an interview on YouTube some months ago. One absolutely brilliant cybersecurity expert invited me and said, I'm going to be interviewed. Come and have a look at what's going on. I went, I watched it, and yep, during the interview, he went to almost everybody's favorite go-to country for cyber criminality. And I thought, oh, well, so you invited me to come and watch you insult me. I've also been on an online course. This one was quite a few years ago now, I think 4 years ago. And on the online course, you can see the map of the world and you see where people are dialing in from different parts of the world to take part in the course. And people were spread across the globe. And as the tutor was speaking, he was talking about phishing and online scams. And he went to an example on a go-to country. That's reputational damage. Now, for the people giving the presentations, it's a joke, it's a ha-ha moment. But for the people who are from these different parts of the world, when you watch the media and the media wants to talk about cybercrime and it picks certain countries, that is more reputational damage. When you become the butt of the joke, when you become the go-to for all these jokes, that's a problem. It's not a problem it's not a problem figuratively speaking. It's a problem factually speaking. A few weeks ago, there was this email making the rounds among some of us online of a man. I think it was a man, I don't really know who it was, but the person shared a screenshot showing us that they had been rejected for a course by SANS, S-A-N-S. And I thought, well, I better reach out to them. What's going on? Because the explanation for the rejection was to do with their country, that the USA had said, this country that you come from, we're not allowed to take people from your country. That's just a summary of it all. But I can share the screenshot with you so that you see exactly what was said. So that's impacting somebody's life. Whatever knowledge he or she was going to try to get from this institution, this well-known institution, effectively has now been lost to them until that ban is lifted. I remember years ago, I think it was 2013, I think I was back home and somebody was trying to set up a PayPal account to receive payment. And we went through the list of countries so that we could set up the account. I said, I'll help you. It's very easy. I have a PayPal account. 2013 or 2015, I don't remember. I think it was 2013. So we scrolled through the number of countries and couldn't find his country on the list. Reputational damage. And then I don't know, years later anyway, PayPal decided to lift whatever it is they had placed on that country, embargo or whatever it is. There is no end to the number of stories. There was another occasion this year, some weeks ago. If you haven't heard this story, it's going through the courts at the moment. There is this person called Hush Puppy. Maybe we don't walk in certain similar circles, but Hush Puppy, well-known well-known person who was accused of cyber criminality. In fact, it's been described as one of the biggest scams ever in history, but we'll see. He's still accused. We'll wait to see what the verdict is. Arrested not too long ago. And shortly after that, more screenshots started to make the rounds among us. And what people were saying was certain organizations in the UAE, because he was arrested in the UAE and taken to the US. Certain organizations in the UAE were no longer employing people from his country, Nigerians. And people were making the link. You know how these things are. They said, well, he's been arrested. He's disgraced everybody. Nigerians in the UAE cannot do certain jobs any longer because of him. And if you see the screenshots, they say it explicitly. We want people who have this, and this, but not people from Nigeria. So reputational change. Now, let's be careful. I'm not linking what happened with the job adverts to what happened with Hush Puppy and the accusations that he's facing. But this is what people were saying online and lamenting about online. And like I said, screenshots, posts all over the place. But it's enough that there is a whiff. You just need a whiff. You just need a rumor with these things. People don't wait for proof. Once they hear about a country and they can attach or link certain crimes over and over again to that country, it starts to have an impact on how people from that country are seen. It has an impact. I've just given you 3 stories. There is no end to the number of stories that we come across, reputational damage affects, okay, cybercriminality emanating from anywhere in the world, because a particular country has been involved in it, factually it's been proven. It doesn't matter if they are the highest proponents, propagators, is no longer relevant. Okay, once the reputation is damaged, it will take a lot to fix it. I've seen, luckily, on the interview I watched some weeks ago, after the interview, I decided to go through the YouTube comments. And what I noticed was a lot of the people who were commenting were saying the country he mentioned is not the biggest country that produces cyber criminals. Why is he mentioning them? And you had people from different parts of the world saying, my country has more cyber criminals. You know, and I thought, wow, things are becoming a bit more balanced, because these people know what they're talking about. They were all saying, why mention that country every time? What about this country? What about that country? And I thought, good. So I guess luckily countries are trying to balance things out, and people are trying to be more fair when it comes to facts, because facts matter. It's not enough for a whiff or a rumor or a suspicion to cause this amount of damage. Then you can have broken national bonds. That is where bonds did exist anyway. So, potential targets and where to find them, like fantastic beasts and where to find them. Remember what I said earlier, anybody can be a Mugu. This is not the time to be embarrassed if you're falling for a cyber crime. Anybody can fall for a cyber crime. It can happen to anyone, okay? Anybody can be a Mugu. You just have to stay cautious, stay alert, and keep on top of the latest approaches used by cyber criminals, latest methods, latest cyber crimes. They tend to go to dating sites, as I talked about this earlier, looking for people who are looking for relationships. People who are open to relationships are basically open. Okay, they maybe would have lowered their guard, they're relaxed, they trust the website, they trust that there is some kind of filtering going on to filter out people who are nefarious, who have ill intentions. They go in there, sneak in, grab people's photographs from the internet, pretend to be who they are not, elevate their statuses, and then they con people over time and they wear them down over time and steal and steal. But the question often arises, again, like I said, you can watch many of these documentaries. Why is it that people tend to fall for these types of scams? And people of a certain age and people of a certain demographic, they are seeking something. Okay, when some people get to a certain age, they may start to think, well, this is my last chance to find a relationship, or I've been in relationships before, I've been married, maybe the husband is late or the wife is late. They want to find a good relationship again. These things happen. Okay, so it's not illogical to see that people are open-minded. I had an interesting conversation with someone some weeks ago who fell for a phishing test, and the person said he fell for the phishing test because of trust. He trusted the person who sent the test. He didn't notice that the email address had been modified, so he thought it came from somebody trustworthy. So trust, okay, and even cybersecurity experts fall for some of these, okay, some of these scams. And then other online forums, okay, in apps, okay, online games, computer games, talking about adults and children as well. Social media platforms are also good places. These attackers are everywhere. If you're on social media, they've probably tried to reach you, tried to contact you. Different platforms where children meet, about the different apps where children go to meet, to have conversations, make friends, share photographs. Then you can even have something as, this came up recently on the news, in fact, poorly regulated or even non-regulated industries. Yes, attackers are there. There was something on the news recently in a different country, not in the United Kingdom, of where some bank staff apparently were making use of customers' accounts, their names, their details, their data to set up, was it alternative accounts, or to carry out some kind of internal cyber crime or data-related crime. I mean, if you can't even trust the bank, so it's not always the case that it's the customer or your friend or family member that's made the mistake. Sometimes if you have industries that are not well regulated, okay, ordinary customers, bank customers can also be a potential targets or Mugus. So where does responsibility for safety online lie? This is a very straightforward one. I always look at responsibility as something that starts with me. So I said the targets themselves, first of all. Okay, that's really important. I'm introduced as somebody who is a researcher in the cyber physical security space. That's mainly to look at smart environments, smart cars, smart homes. Okay, just because your home is a smart home, the door operates itself. When it knows that you are coming home, it unlocks itself. The heater goes on, the television turns on, the bath water starts to run. That does not mean you are no longer responsible. All right. When you go home in a non-smart home, so to speak, don't you lock your door in the evening? You lock your car. Okay. You turn on your camera by yourself. You have home camera, home security cameras. Just because the home has become smarter doesn't mean you should become less smart. You are still in charge of your own security. Okay. So I believe in individual responsibility. I promote and I encourage individual responsibility. But if we go right down to the bottom of the list that you can see on the page, I also think that security experts, cybersecurity experts, have a part to play when it comes to safety online, the safety online of individuals, of organizations, people who do not know as much as cybersecurity experts. Of course, the others on the list have a responsibility. So the service providers, regulatory bodies, and governments. But let's look at cybersecurity experts, which is the main topic that we are looking at today. So individuals, who they are, where they can be found, and where do cybersecurity experts come in? Well, as an expert, you can equip end users with the tools, the knowledge, and the cultural mindset to manage their own online safety. All right. While I talk through this topic, please, can you release the third poll, if you don't mind? And then we'll carry on. If you could just release the third poll. Thank you. So cybersecurity experts can equip end users with the tools, with the knowledge, and the cultural mindset that they require to manage their own safety online. I am aware that some cybersecurity experts feel exasperated. They think people are careless, or why can't they think before they click? Absolutely. But we need to recognize something, okay, very quickly. Just as you don't know everything about every subject, mechanics, for example, fixing a car, carrying out a brain surgery, all right, replacing a person's heart, giving them a heart transplant, skating, flying a plane, all right, so many areas there. I mean, maybe some of you on the call have listened to that list and said, well, I know all that, I'm an expert in all that. Okay, fantastic, but I'm pretty certain there are things you don't know things about. You would be happy when somebody explains these things to you, these subjects to you, these topics to you, in a way that you understand what they are talking about, and in a way that doesn't leave you embarrassed. You are the expert in this field. I've seen cybersecurity experts who are quite disdainful, insulting towards members of the public, their colleagues. They think they should know better. But I think the mistake is thinking that just because everybody knows how to use a computer, everybody is a cybersecurity expert. Most people don't know what you know. You can help people around you if you can share your knowledge. Now, I'm not saying come and join me in my organization and I'll pay you a lot of money to help members of the public. Actually, what I'm calling for is if you can do this in your spare time, I suppose, or as part of your organization, maybe your company, you decide to do something for the public, go to schools, give talks. I'll talk about some examples of what you can do. I'm not saying, do it for money. I'm just making a suggestion that out of your own spare time, think about the different ways in which you can improve the situation at the moment for members of the public, because too many people are falling for scams. And I think the mistake is assuming that because everybody you know is online, they know exactly how to be safe online. That's not true. That's not accurate. And it's a really painful thing that when you start to discover how little people know from an IT perspective and from a cybersecurity perspective. I'll give you one example very quickly. I was talking to someone, I think it was in October last year. We were sitting down in the mall somewhere. He was working on a project and he said he wanted me to be involved. And I said, of course, yes, I'll give you my number. And giving him my number, I think it took about 5 minutes. He had an iPhone, but could not really press the number. When he managed to take my number, so to key it in, he typed my name, WEDE, and the phone kept auto-correcting it. For him to fix that was a problem, to stop the autocorrect, because where he was supposed to slide, he was pressing. Where he was supposed to press, he was sliding. That's basic tech, IT knowledge, okay, technology knowledge. And this is somebody, I think, in his 70s, I think. He's got the phone, working on projects, still active, doing different things, but that fundamental IT knowledge he didn't have, to a point where I said, okay, let's use WhatsApp instead of just calls so that we can exchange, quickly chat. And you tell me about the project, I'll talk about how I can get involved. So I said, okay, I'll send you a message. Send a message into WhatsApp. I typed the message and sent it, and he put the phone to his lips and said, hello. And I thought, well, that's not what. So that was very painful to witness, because I think sometimes we believe everybody knows the same thing, because the information technology, the technology is everywhere, it's ubiquitous, everybody's using it, everybody knows. No, just because they have these devices doesn't mean that they're up to scratch or up to speed. So anything you can do to help, to support is useful. I was talking to somebody else. This was more recent, not last year, a few weeks ago. And there was this news making the rounds again about cyber criminals and what they are doing around POS, so point of sale system. So there's this business that's run in different parts of Africa where you walk into a shop, a kiosk just along the side of the road. You want to transfer money, instead of going to a bank or calling somebody to help you or going to, MoneyGram or any of those other transfer services. You just go into the kiosk, you hand over the cash and they transfer it to the person, or you hand over a card. Now there was this story started to make the rounds online that when you hand over your card to these people to make the transfer, if you don't pay attention, they will take a photograph of the front of the card and the back of the card. It's obvious what they can do with that information. And the person I was talking to, an elderly gentleman, I think also maybe late 60s, early 70s, he said, oh, really? Can they use that? Wow, is this true? So not everybody is on the same page. Now, he told me, well, they can never catch me. I only use checkbooks. I don't use cards. I don't use any of these things. I don't do money transfers. I always use cash and checkbooks. But you start to see when you talk to people that we are not all on the same page. Now, luckily, of course, it's a good thing that some banks put extra checks in place. But listen, bypass, if an attacker is determined, they can bypass any of these, okay? So it's teaching people culture. Cybersecurity culture, okay? The tools, knowledge, and the cultural mindsets to manage their own online safety by themselves. So I'm going to assume that the third poll has gone out and is being completed. So we'll continue. Cybersecurity experts, you have all this knowledge, vast experience, years and years of learning, skills, okay? You've written books. You walk up to people, the examples, people that I just told you about, and maybe even younger people with degrees, but not cybersecurity degrees or experience, and they start to do certain things. That's not the time to get angry, start to scream and harass and insult people and demean them, okay? The best way to get people to change is probably to use a different approach, okay? A clear, definite approach that is unwavering. You make it clear to them, this is what you risk if you continue to do what you are doing. Don't do this because it will lead to this. So we'll get to that shortly. It's not enough to just tell people don't do this. It's a very good idea to tell them how hackers use that information. What happens at the other end is very important. Otherwise, you end up with a series of mantras. It's good to have maybe a short set of do's and don'ts, 5 maybe, or 10 do's and don'ts. But when you become preachy all the time, don't do that, don't do that, don't. It becomes a very long, unmanageable list. But when you bring them into the mindset, the way the attackers think, and that's another thing you are taught, Cybersecurity 101, I gave you 2 earlier, where you sign an agreement and you also recognize that the most secure devices are the ones that are unusable and unreachable. Okay, so security is an ongoing thing, it's not fixed, all right? But you must also remember then, as you talk to people in the cybersecurity space, must be kind, must be understanding. You must remember they don't know as much as you do, or they don't even know what you do. Okay, so you explain the key concepts to them over time, okay, slowly, and give them time to digest. And as part of Cybersecurity 101, we are typically taught to step into the mindset of the attacker. Think like the hacker, think like the attacker. It's going to be difficult for ordinary or everyday members of the public, or members of the public, to do, all right? Because they just want to use the internet in many cases. Many of us just want to use the internet, want to just use these resources. But we have been taught to think, what could go wrong here? So if you can encourage that way of thinking, what could go wrong? It will help a lot of people that you know, friends, family, colleagues, as I said, and just the public generally, because that information will spread. Okay, it will percolate downwards, it will spread across, and will help keep more and more people safe. So our role, your role, is to educate. If you work in a space where you design applications, websites, hardware products, other software products, try to make sure you design secure products. All right. Apply useful security controls in the space in which you work. I don't want to go into those in too much detail. I want to focus on A, because we're talking about members of the public, your direct engagement with them. But these are important backups. Then you can also leverage the use of data and machine learning. Now, that seems like something that is tangential, but if we are looking at a situation where maybe we're talking about people who maybe cannot help themselves, okay, of necessity, they need full-time support. You can't give them the 5 do's and don'ts only and just walk away. That's the importance of controls and the importance of leveraging data. So what kinds of controls? Let's give an example of what some banks started to do not too long ago. You log into your account, want to make a transfer. The banks have introduced security gates or controls where they say, do you know the person you are sending the money to? You've never sent money to this person before. Oh, you are sending X amount of money. Are you sure? Or they put a question there, or just a note or a banner saying, your bank will never contact you to share X or will never ask you for money. These are very useful triggers and controls. You can also look at patterns of behavior. That's where data and machine learning comes in. You look at the pattern of behavior of this person who requires support. And if there is a change in the pattern and behavior, you can use the algorithm to automatically trigger a response. You can block the transaction, okay, automatically, because you can say, well, we need to provide support for them. We know they cannot think completely and support themselves. So think completely and provide the complete holistic support the way independent individuals can. So you can put in a gate there and say, no, I need to ring your carer. I need to ring your father to come and approve this transaction. Okay, but it's looking at patterns of behavior. What is acceptable? So the family members can build a baseline. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the family members can build a baseline. I don't know how much you know about machine learning and the different types, so classification and clustering, but they can use a classification approach and build a baseline and say, well, if the person wants to spend £10 or less on a daily basis, approve. More than £10 in a day, don't approve. Or if they get to £80 by Wednesday, don't approve. That's enough for the week. There is so much you can do. So you can put that as a baseline, and then you change the baseline as time goes on. Okay, and these can all be handled algorithmically using algorithms. They don't have to be handled manually. But I will leave that. I don't want to go into too much detail in that area. But yes, security controls, like I said, designing security in from the very beginning rather than treating security as an afterthought is very important. But let's look at where when it comes to talking to the members of the audience, rather than as part of your job, which is probably what you will see in BC and D, unless, of course, you work in the education space. But let's look at what you can do in detail. Supporting the public, you can provide general IT education. Just how to lock your screen. I was talking about the elderly gentleman who did not know that when you type a message in WhatsApp and you send, it doesn't ring at his end. So he didn't need to say hello. He just had to type the reply. And that proved difficult as well. But general IT knowledge, okay, cybersecurity, education, and hygiene, very important as well. Talking to people about how attackers benefit from cyber criminal activities. So if they are less careful and the cyber criminal activity is successful, this is what they might be contributing to. Tell them a story from beginning to end rather than a set of instructions. Encourage a healthy respect for data and information boundaries. Once data has been shared, it cannot be taken back, but you can share less as time goes on. Do you really need to share what you're about to share? Teach people to be skeptical. Cybersecurity experts tend to have that innately. In fact, I think it's what drives some people into cybersecurity. I can speak for myself anyway. There's a lot of skepticism. To some degree, for some people, there's paranoia. People question everything. Okay, encourage that. Remember, it's not the same thing as locking up the internet and throwing it to the bottom of the ocean, which makes it unusable. But encourage that attitude. All right. Foster a healthy attitude of skepticism online. Talk to people about different types of scams, how they are carried out, and what their roles may be in the success of different scams. You can also keep it simple. You can give them a top 5 set of do's and don'ts. You can put those in the living room, on the kitchen table. If you live in a very smart home, concerned about data being leaked, give them a set of do's and don'ts, okay? You can remove, and by the way, that doesn't have to be in your homes as well. It can be in your places of worship. It can be in your sports centers. It can be at your office. You can put these anywhere and everywhere. Remove the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, fog that some people have. These don't just apply to senior managers. I know that we always talk about FUD in relation to senior managers and spending in cybersecurity. There's a lot of FUD when it comes to ordinary people as well. Then we need to demystify, okay? Demystify cybersecurity, demystify technology. I watched a program maybe 3 years ago now, I think, and the journalist was talking on television about the dark arts. I thought, we need to stop doing this. We really need to. The people who are involved are individuals, and a lot of the time, to be honest, is algorithms doing the work. So yes, there are very smart people who know the ins and outs of technology and how computers work, but we really need to start to demystify this and make people more comfortable with technology so that they know how they can take charge and be responsible for their online safety. More on supporting the public. You can use analogies, jokes, mnemonics, songs, infographics, and so on and so forth. Take them into the mind of the attacker. You can see an example rhyme I've put in green there. Please, I wrote that myself. Feel free to use your own rhymes. There are more rhymes online, poems, online about cybersecurity, warnings and suggestions. But yes, this is something that I just quickly put together. I thought it would give you an idea of what you can prepare as well for people that you talk to. It can just be something 2 lines long, 4 lines long. It doesn't have to be 16 whole lines. Highlights the importance of personal responsibility. Also remind people, I know of someone whose, I think 1 terabyte external hard drive was affected by ransomware, and his internal hard drive, it was really painful, but I had to keep repeating to him that, please, it's not usually about you. Sometimes it's just a spray of an attack, and they just hope to catch someone. All right. And once they get them, they can say, well, you give me X number of Bitcoins, and then I will send you the key. So don't take it personally, because that's the worst thing you can do. Unless, of course, you are maybe high profile, in which case you might want to speak to your cybersecurity advisors. And if they're doing a good job, they probably will protect you from the cyber attacks anyway. But nothing is 100% proof or foolproof, so to speak, or security proof. Things still get through. Just make it clear, okay? In many cases, it's not about you. Don't take it as, oh my God, somebody on the planet somewhere hates me and wants me destroyed. They've taken down my Xbox or my. Sometimes it's just you happen not to have the right antivirus or a strong enough antivirus. You didn't have your firewall turned on, your password was weak, you didn't have multi-factor authentication. A lot of these things were not set up properly or not set up at all. Controls were missing, for example, no updates, no upgrades, in place on your device, and this happened. So take responsibility, but don't always take it as a personal affront. It can stop you from progressing or thinking about a solution because you're tied down thinking, who did this to me? Again, yes, some people do get directly attacked. Absolutely. I talked about whaling and spear phishing earlier. Think about the terminology that you use as well. You talk to people, try to use language that they can understand. The importance of analogies comes in there. And then patience, but I'll leave that with you. So that's my example rhyme, in case you want to have a look at it. And assuming there are still people watching this presentation, I have come to the end of my presentation. I would like to go and have a look at the poll results, but while I do, I will hand over to the BCS team and I'll let them say a few words, I suppose, while I pick up the poll results. And then let me just quickly conclude, by the way. Sorry. So we've had a look at the way targets are viewed. okay, by cyber criminals. In many cases, they are not viewed as individuals. They're looked upon with disdain. They are seen as potential people that will fall for the crime anyway, okay? Usually seen as fools, not very bright. Take that away. Because I think when you tell people that that's how they are seen, it might trigger something in them. It might awaken something in them and make them more cautious. There is a part to play, okay, on all our parts, okay? Potential targets and cybersecurity experts, we all have our roles to play, and we should, as much as possible, try to play these roles. Encourage, teach, explain, use analogies, poems, use scenarios as well, with understanding that not everybody will understand everything the first time, just as you might not understand the structure of the human brain, for example, the first time, or how what you need to do to fly a plane, unless you are taught extensively. And I think staying safe online, we can improve the safety of the members of the public online if we work collaboratively, if we're not standoffish and we don't say, oh, these people, they're always so careless, they're not as smart as I am. I think if we collaborate, if we support, if we educate over time, people's safety, the safety of members of the public will improve. We hear less and less about successful scam stories, and we'll probably hear more and more about entrapments where members of the public, and this is very popular online. I've noticed this. I speak as a Nigerian, and I've noticed that a lot of Nigerians post videos online of calls that they have with potential scammers who call them and try to scam them. And they let the scammers go on and on and on, and then they reveal that they know exactly what the scammers are trying to do. One of the most recent ones I watched was around the whole MFA bypass that scammers use nowadays. So they've got your password and your username, no problem. They try to log in, then they are told a code has been sent to the phone. Pick up the code, enter it into maybe Microsoft or Google or whatever, any of those websites. So the scammer then calls you with your phone and they tell you, well, I'm from the bank, I'm resetting your password, I'm doing something security related, but you need to send me a code which I will send to your phone immediately. Just check it and send me that code now. Read it out to me. So they hit reset, the password is reset, the code is sent to the victim's phone or the target's phone. Then the target reads the number back to the attacker enters the number, and they now own your account because they've got the password. They can go in and change the phone number, and that's you done, locked out. Unless there are other controls in place to say, well, you can't change the phone number unless you get a code in the user's other email address. But if they've got access to that email address, then that's the end of the story. So you have videos like that making the rounds online, people saying, oh, you want the code on my phone? Then the person just reads out a random useless number, and the scammer keeps trying to reset the number. So we need to get to that kind of place where people know when to hang up. Don't talk, don't engage. But obviously, we can see that there are some people who want to engage and want to show up the scammers, but just be very careful. They can still get you even in the middle of all of that. My suggestion is don't even engage. But it's been interesting talking to you this evening. I have gone beyond 40 minutes, but it's been brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. I'll go and have a look at the poll results. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much for that very insightful and thought-provoking presentation, Dr. Oriwoh. Whilst you're looking at the poll results, I'll just scan through some of the questions we've received from our viewers. Right, let's have a look here. Okay, I've got one here from Kes, and the question is, what other controls can be put in place for people who have cognitive impairment or disabilities? Then she follows on with, if cybercriminals prey on such people from the point of accessibility, what can they do in that situation? Do you have an answer for that one, Dr. Oriwoh?
I heard the first question, what other controls? I didn't hear the second question, sorry.
Yeah, so she goes on to say, if cybercriminals prey on them from an accessibility aspect, what can they do in that situation?
Okay. So what other controls can be put in place for people with cognitive disabilities? I don't know if she was there during the presentation when I talked about the controls that can be put in place using machine learning, for example, using security gates.
Right.
So that's a very useful one because they might not be people who can make decisions independently. So it's really important that we have those kinds of security gates in place. So if, again, I'm going to go back to the banking example. The parent or the carer or family member might decide to work with the bank and to say, when they spend a certain amount of money, they get to a particular limit, put a block on the account and make sure that there's an approval from somewhere else. Now, of course, that's something you might want to also put in place for children. Some may say, well, let's just have that in place for children. Okay, but this is something that also might apply to those who have learning disabilities, cognitive impairments as well. Apart from that, you can also use data in the way that it's used for the elderly. There's a lot of research in this area where you can predict what is going to go wrong. You can predict a fall. So an elderly person, you want them to live alone in their homes, independent of anybody. You don't want them to go into care homes. So you can put sensors around the house. Okay, so this is going now into cyber physical security. And you can monitor their movement over time, monitor when they do have falls, and then you can use accumulated data. And this is being well researched. You can check online, looking at predictive analysis and data analytics and machine learning around prediction in healthcare. And it's used in many other areas as well. But this is a very popular one where you say, well, I predict that this person is going to fall on Tuesday next week. So I have to make sure that there's a carer on hand. All right. It's not exact, but you can predict close enough. All right. So it's you can use data like that as well, or that kind of predictive analysis to start to predict what days, what times people with learning difficulties go online, what websites they want to go to. So you can accumulate and create a baseline that, oh, this daughter of ours or this sister or this brother or this uncle, they like to go to these particular websites. Every time they go on, X person always joins, but we've confirmed that person's identity. But this person, somebody else always joins and always requests photographs. So what we are going to do is we're going to disable upload, for example, as far as, so when the person tries to upload, it can go into a waiting area. If family members, I know it sounds like scrutiny and policing, but we do need to be protective and we need to be aware of what is going on. So it can go into a holding area. A family member sees the picture and releases the picture, if it is something you want them to share. All right. You don't want them to be conned or duped into sharing private photographs, because once it goes online, now, if it's somebody they're in a relationship with, the family might say, oh, well, we know this person, so don't put photographs that are going to X person in a holding area. It really is up to the culture, up to the family. All right. I'm not going to go, into too much detail about the ethics of particular individuals, but as far as I know, if you can, avoid sharing intimate photographs as much as possible, because the internet highway is an open highway. So you cannot really tell who the man in the middle may be in these circumstances. And the other question, accessibility.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that first one. Just a couple more here. I've got one from Shushla, and they're asking, is there anything more that could be done from a legislation point of view that would enable better support for cybersecurity efforts?
I'm sure there are many things that can be done. Better support for cybersecurity efforts, right? So perhaps something to encourage organizations to do more to serve the communities around which they operate. That would be useful. But I think in this country, that's already very well done, because a lot of organizations send employees, to go and give talks in schools. But yes, I think if more can be done to encourage companies to recognize that, okay, you've got all of these experts centered in your organization working for you. If you don't mind, if you can give up some of your time in a year to go and give talks in these to students, for example, to the elderly in care homes, in religious houses, give up some of your time. Maybe the government gets into some kind of arrangement with the organization. I think that would be useful. It's all about sharing knowledge and putting this at the forefront of people's minds. Sorry, can you repeat? I don't know if that's answering the question, but more that can be done to...
Yeah, it was saying, is there anything more that could be done from legislation point of view that would enable better support for cybersecurity efforts? I think you answered that in some ways.
Okay.
And then I've got a question from Jack as well, which is, do you think young people have become naive to these attacks, as the idea of old and vulnerable people are the only people who fall for them?
I do not think young and vulnerable people have become naive. I think many of them are quite aware of these attacks, and they're quite alert, and they pay quite a bit of attention. I'll just switch this story to, they pay a lot of attention to what goes on online. They're very aware of the risks and the threats. I'm not speaking about all young people, but the risks and the threats that they face when they go online, go into different apps, for example, different forums, different social media platforms. I don't think they have become naive at all. I think the message is getting out there. From all of the talks I talked about, different films being made, even by young people, to talk about the risks online, documentaries that they watch, stories from other people as well, harrowing stories that of people who have been hurt or affected by cyber criminality and cybercrime. So I wouldn't say they've become naive. No, not at all. No. More can be done. Yes. And I think the focus on the elderly is, I think it's more because some of them, again, I'm going back to the example of the man I talked about before. It's not even the cybersecurity part of things that's the problem. It's the technology. Even being aware, okay, of what can be done, of what is possible. I talked about the man who said, oh, taking a photograph of the front and the back of a card. Oh my God, is that a risk? That awareness is not even there. Again, that's possible even with young people. People of all ages may not be aware of this. So it's not as if it's a particular age group, but we need to get to a place where we carry everybody along. I'll give you an example of why we need to look after those who some may want to write off in terms of age, the elderly, okay, and security and in the internet and technology generally. I remember, gosh, this was maybe 20 years ago now, a young man went on a journey and he needed a result slip. This was when things were still done only on paper. Nothing was being done online for this particular organization. And he left the slip at home. And it was his elderly mother that went to his room and searched and swept from the roof to the ground and found the slip. It had dropped somewhere in the room and she found it. You see, so we need to treasure the people who hold the keys to the castle, because you might go out there and think you are safe and secure, but somebody will call your house and say, oh, your son is stuck somewhere. Please, dear mama or grandmother, please, can you quickly give us the key to this or the code to this? But if you've trained them to be skeptical, basically they'll know to hang up and then to call you or to disconnect the phone and call you with a different phone. So it works to our benefit as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm mindful of the time. I've got one quick one here, last one possibly, from Garant. Question is, could multi-factor authentication with a second factor in the hands of a carer, help mitigate attacks on vulnerable people?
Sorry, Ronald, sorry, can you repeat that? I wasn't...
Yeah,
could
not a problem.
Multi-factor?
Yeah, could MFA, multi-factor authentication, with a second factor in the hands of a carer help mitigate attacks on vulnerable people?
That's a good one, right? Yes, so multi-factor authentication. So in case some of us are not aware, but I expect everybody is aware, it's basically the use of different factors. It could be something you know, something you have, something you are. It could include biometrics, it could include a password. So something you can remember, it can be a token, for example, it can be a code that is sent to your phone. So can this be used to mitigate attacks if the second factor is put in the hands of someone else, maybe like a carer? So absolutely brilliant. It does remind me of something that I was going to say actually in the presentation around the use of the approach that is used in some places, like people who sell jewelry and maybe in some banks where you have to have two people with a key rather than just one person being able to go in and open a vault or a safe. You have to have two keys at the same time or something like that. So yeah, it's a good one to consider. It's a good one that, because the person who might have some learning difficulties might enter all of the required information, but may not know, okay, that the information is being harvested. They may not know who they are talking to, who is urging them to log in to get the data out of a particular environment, for example. So in high risk environments, high security environments where data maybe is something that should be protected, yes, again, the vault approach. You might say, and this is for everybody, you might say, well, we shouldn't allow one person only to be able to log in and get out this data. Let's have two people. One person logs in, somebody else elsewhere logs in, okay, and then that unlocks the data storage, whatever, maybe something like, for example, the secret to Coca-Cola, the recipe. You can have multiple people logging in. Now, in terms of sharing the actual factor, I would not recommend dispersing the factors. So where I use one of the factors and somebody else uses the other factor. It's an interesting one, but I would still recommend that the person who is unfortunately, learning impaired or has learning difficulties also gets into the habit of using multiple factors to log in. So then you can have a trusted third person with a third factor in place or another extra factor in place to finally open up the access. But I would not recommend that we reduce it to just one for the actual key primary individual. And then whoever you're handing over to simply has to be trustworthy. I don't know. It's a really interesting one to consider because multi-factor authentication already is addressing some of the concerns that we have, assuming you don't bypass it by getting the phone call from that, scammer that says I'm from your organization. So maybe to bypass things like that for people with learning challenges, you could have a third. So you have two with the person. The password has already been compromised. The scammer calls them. They give the code to the scammer. But then there's a third factor that's necessary because they have learning difficulties. Yes, I don't really see why that should be a problem. We are already talking about putting layers anyway, and layers and checks for them. So it's one to investigate, and it's one to investigate. Yes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, Dr. Oriwoh. I really appreciate that. I know we're running out of time now, but just before we do, I don't know if you still wanted to go through the poll results.
Yes, I do, if you don't mind. Okay. Okay, so 84.2% of the people on the call don't work in the cybersecurity industry. Ooh, okay. Hello. Hopefully it was interesting to you. I tried to keep it at that level. To the best of your knowledge, have you ever been the target of a successful online attack? 73.7% said no. 26.3% said yes, they have been targets of successful cyber attacks. Okay, remember what I said. Don't take that to be that you were, targeted. In some cases, you may not have been targeted, but thanks for that information. And all this is anonymized, by the way. And then you were part of a wider non-targeted attack, 81.8%. Targeted specifically, 18.2%. And I found out about it, 81.8% said they found out about it by themselves. That's a high number of people. That's good. 18.2%, so it's the same number as the people who were targeted. So I was targeted specifically, and I found out about it because someone else informed me, e.g. my bank. So it's a good thing you were informed, and I hope you were able to recover whatever was lost. Feel free to type a comment if you want to, but this is all anonymized, and I hope the issue was resolved as well. So and then the last set of questions: do you think you now have the skills and knowledge to guard against the past attack or attacks? 92.3% said yes. All right. 7.7% of people said no. They still don't have the knowledge. So I will leave this with the BCS. I hope the talk today was a little bit encouraging and useful to the cybersecurity experts in the room and the BCS more generally, BCS Hertfordshire branch and BCS generally. So I think we need to do a lot more to talk to members of the public generally, especially since we have 7.7% saying they don't think that they now have the skills and knowledge to guard against the past attack. And if you could communicate with the scammers or cyber criminals that were involved in the attacks, what will you say to them today? So these are really interesting responses. I can share the comments because I asked people to give long form comments to this question. If you could communicate with the scammers that were involved in that attack, what would you say to them? And they were very, there's some interesting comments here, which I can share, download and share with BCS. They're all anonymized. Somebody here said, good effort. Someone says, why aren't you putting your skills to better use in industry? And someone else said, I hope you are okay, and so on and so forth. But yes, very interesting. It's interesting to note that, fewer people than most will not know what to do. So that's encouraging that most people would know what to do. I really hope that those who were targeted got the kind of support that they require. And I think very, very importantly for me is noting that there are people who still will not know what to do. But that number needs to go down to 0, because we need people to, if they've experienced this, to learn, to be taught the right lessons from it, and then so that they can guard against and avoid these situations in future. So, and it's interesting to see that people found out about the attacks, 81.8%, that's most people by themselves. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Glad to see all of this worked. Thank you, BCS. I will leave it to you to round up.
Okay, thank you very much. For me, I think the takeaway here was awareness and training, and also sharing of intelligence and IT knowledge. But I think also in terms of victims of such attacks and being victims of these scams, the place to report them is through Action Fraud. If you Google Action Fraud, that's the National Reporting Intelligence Center for both cyber and fraud. Yes, for closing remarks, I'm going to pass over now to Peter, and thank you very much once again. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Ronald, and thank you, Dr. Oriwoh, for a very thought-provoking evening. Thanks also to our viewers. We're obviously trialing this, and apologies for a marginally late start. We did receive a number of questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time for them all. If you've enjoyed this, please make sure that you push the like button on YouTube, and also let us know in the comments. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please subscribe and also hit the notification bell so that you're informed about new BCS Hertfordshire content. We'll be producing another video towards the end of this month, or beginning of October. In the meantime, I should perhaps just mention that we're hosting our AGM next Thursday, the 17th. It will not be broadcast on YouTube, and it will not be recorded, but an email will be going out to members, and the information about joining will be within that. So on behalf of everyone here, everyone involved with tonight's meeting, thank you very much indeed. I won't say safe journey home, because I'm sure everyone's already there. So good night, everyone.
Good night.